Obamacare in court, Israel versus Hamas, Russia versus Ukraine, and the crisis at the border. I'm Kelsey Nelson, and this is The Square Circle. Hello, and welcome to The Square Circle. I'm your host, Kelsey Nelson. Joining us today are Nick Brana, formerly of Terry McAuliffe's campaign, Gregory Clay of gdclay.com, conservative writer and editor Brian McNichol, and Jason Russell of Economics 21. Lots of big stories this week. The first one we'll tackle is Obamacare's roller coaster in court on Tuesday. The D.C. Court of Appeals ruled that the language of the bill forbids subsidies in states that did not set up their own exchanges. Within hours, the Fourth Circuit ruled in the opposite direction. Nick Brana, what are the chances that the Supreme Court will take up this issue and that is a serious threat to the law itself?
I think that the Supreme Court likely will resolve this, and I don't find it a very serious threat to the law itself. I do find, however, that it is startling that Republican-appointed judges within the court that ruled against this Obamacare federal allowance are preventing the expansion of Obamacare. Something that I really kind of read from this, and that's part of a broader trend to me, is this kind of politicization of our judiciary. The way in which the court that ruled against it was majority Republican. The court that upheld it was majority Democrat. And we see the same kinds of rulings from the Supreme Court dominating the Supreme Court rulings, these 5-4 rulings where the 5 conservatives are voting straight down the line against the 5 Democratic-appointed Supreme Court justices. I think that's a very troubling trend.
I disagree. I don't think it was a politicized decision. I think the 3 judges took an honest look at it, and I think what they found when they looked at the legislative intent of the law was that there were not meant to be federal subsidies going to these states that did not set up exchanges. Jonathan Gruber, who is an MIT economist, and he's called the architect of Obamacare because he was a highly paid major consultant when they were writing the law, even said back in 2012 that states are incentivized to set up their own exchanges because they will not be allowed to receive federal or subsidies if they don't. So it was the legislative intent of the law to not give out federal subsidies to states that don't give exchanges.
It said there 9 times.
Yeah.
No exchange, no money.
It's certainly not a typo, as some people have been saying.
Now, does this mean that the premiums increase?
Well, you would get your subsidies. I mean, your premium, but what is said is then the weller people, as it were, healthier people opt out, and so you're only insuring the sicker patients, the more expensive patients, which would make it go up.
Roughly 80% of people who bought exchanges on the federal exchange, healthcare.gov or over the phone or whatever method they used, did purchase plans that did have these tax credits on them. So now after the opposite ruling, they're not in jeopardy anymore. But if this case does go forward, then those would be in jeopardy. And given that the premiums would be much higher, then I do think that Obamacare not as a whole wouldn't be in jeopardy, but I think there would be a strong case for further health reform in future Congresses.
How does it affect penalties?
Well, the big piece of this is the employer mandate is triggered when an employee applies for a subsidy. The government says, hey, you're not giving sufficient coverage because your employee needed a subsidy. So if there's no requirement that there's no subsidies, then there's no employer mandate in 36 states, which means, one of 2 things can happen. Either the 36 join the 14, or the 14 say, we've put our businesses at a big economic disadvantage, and they drop.
The Supreme Court, I believe, is certainly going to resolve this at some point. I think it's certainly going to make it there. And it is striking how easily it would be to resolve. I do think that I disagree with you on the intent of the law. I think that the intent of the law was for the coverage to be available at that rate. And it is a shame to me that so many states have opted out and are creating this problem. It's kind of endless legal battle over it. What also concerns me, as far as the American judiciary is concerned, is relevant here, is that Obama has himself been appointing a tremendous amount of corporate judges to the American federal bench. 75% of his judges nominated have corporate litigation backgrounds, whereas only 4% have actually public interest group backgrounds.
But part of that is federal courts are increasingly what they're doing is corporate law, because criminal matters are being adjudicated at the state level more now. It's sort of a natural thing.
Polls do not say that Obamacare is very popular, and they don't say the president's very popular. And I think the people elected those Republican state houses for a reason. A lot of that was backlash in 2010 from the passage of the law. That was a major motivator in the 2010 elections. And I think as a result, you saw these people that believed that they were elected to be anti-Obamacare, even though it was just a state house. And in the end, they decided not to expand Obamacare for a good reason.
It would be very hard to deny that we have a problem with health care coverage in this country. Out of OECD countries, we have the worst coverage at the highest rates. This expanding coverage to 7 million people, I agree that the law would not have been my first option either. I opt, frankly, for a single-payer option. That's what succeeded in Canada for over 50 years now. Most of Europe has that kind of thing. Every industrialized country in the world has a superior and more socialized healthcare system than we do. It's because we have this hyper-privatized system that the problem exists to begin with.
Now,
I fundamentally disagree with that. I think the rest of the world comes to us for healthcare. We are inventing the drugs. We are inventing the medical procedures. Our hospital, when a world leader decides where he's going to go, he doesn't go to France or Germany. He goes to us. If you look at life expectancy, once someone gets to be 40 years old, the life expectancy in the United States is the highest in the world by about 7 years. I mean, we are winning the war on medicine because we've not socialized. My dad's 86. 3 years ago, he had a knee replacement. You know how long it's been since they did a knee replacement on a guy in England that's 83 years old? Like 30 years, because they say, hey, you're old, we don't have the money to take care of you, you limp.
right.
You know?
Life
Or the
expectancy
technology.
actually higher through much of Western Europe, and particularly in Scandinavian countries.
Now,
This
since
is
this,
lower murder rates. That's what I'm saying. Once you get to be 40 and you're past all the youth ways of getting killed, shot, drugs, whatever,
Car crashes.
then, when it's just how long does the medicine keep you alive, we're way ahead of everyone else.
I'd like to remind our audience that you can submit your questions to our guests through our website at www.publicsquare.net, and we'll answer as many as we can live on air towards the end of the show. Amid the ongoing conflict in Gaza, we'd like to focus on the media's coverage of the violence. Some accuse the media of being biased toward the Palestinians, while the MSNBC commentator was fired for accusing the network of being pro-Israel. Gregory Clay, in your opinion, has the mainstream media in general, and we're talking here about the major news networks, major newspapers, etc., being pro-Israel, pro-Palestinian, neutral, or neutral. How would you criticize their coverage?
well, I begin discussing some comments from viewers, because viewers can produce some most interesting insights and observations. One viewer went right down the line, alphabet soup. He says NBC equals nothing but communists. He says MSNBC equals morons spewing nothing but communism. Okay? CNN doesn't mean cable news network to him. CNN to him means communist news network. Again, this is not me speaking. I'm just offering some viewer comments. Now, which takes us to, I want to clarify that, make sure. Takes us to ABC. What does ABC mean? It doesn't mean American Broadcasting Company to one viewer. It means always broadcasting communism. Okay? Let's go to CBS. not Columbia Broadcasting System. CBS now, to this viewer, means communist broadcasting Stalinism. Okay? Communist broadcasting Stalinism. Okay.
See the
Fox.
little apostrophe there on the end.
Right. Fox, okay, has more of a comment, more of a phrase, not necessarily based on abbreviation. Fox is no better than the rest and will give Satan equal time in a talking head debate. That's this viewer's definition of Fox. Okay. Now, I mean, whether it's pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, obviously, it's in the eyes of the viewer and the beholder. One thing I did notice the other night on Sean Hannity's show, he made a point of saying that John Kerry was going to Egypt, to negotiate on behalf of Hamas. And it's very obvious to me. Yeah, that's what he said. It's very obvious to me that Fox is very pro-Israel. I mean, that is very obvious. You don't. I mean, you can just watch it for a couple of minutes and figure that out. It's amazing how different people can view different things a different way. I know as one viewer said, CNN is totally irrelevant in this. CNN doesn't know how to cover news.
Just looking at plane, that Malaysian plane.
Yeah.
Still looking around the.
Yeah, still looking for the first Malaysian plane.
That's right.
Not the first one.
That's right.
From 3 months ago.
Still down in the Indian Ocean.
Right. Exactly. And here's another one from another person, someone who's blaming Israel. This person says Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians. Remember, the Jews started this by bombing Gaza in retaliation for 3 Israeli teens kidnapped and murdered. And it covers the gamut. One of the things that it's going to be interesting this weekend is on Sunday when the media shows come on. Like me, I'm going to make sure that I watch Brian Stelter's show at 11 o'clock on CNN. Reliable sources, and get his take on the media coverage. And then, and interestingly enough, at the same time, Howard Kurtz has his show Media Buzz on Fox, and I bet you anything, their analysis of the media coverage is will be polar opposite. So it also depends on the network, the channel. Fox, of course, has a reputation of being, more conservative. MSNBC has a reputation of being more liberal. CNN. To me, this is me talking now, not the viewers. To me, I always view CNN as being kind of down the middle. That's my opinion. You all probably disagree, but it's open to the floor.
I certainly disagree. I think the coverage has been biased heavily towards the Israelis. I picked up the Washington Post on a Sunday edition when the Israeli invasion of Gaza was in full swing. There were articles like bumblebee sightings spark a happy buzz, and model aircraft flyers in Texas warily eye FAA rules. But they found no space whatsoever to include the fact that there was an ongoing massacre of Palestinians, civilians, by the Israeli military. No space whatsoever. That's bias. That's media bias for you. AP also released push notifications. I subscribe to their mobile push notifications about one missing Israeli soldier. I didn't hear intel yesterday about any dead Gazans. Hundreds of Gazans have died. 700 Gazans have died now.
I think
most
more
of them have been civilians.
Yeah.
Over 100 of them have been children.
Yeah.
The Israeli military, this is not a... John Kerry had these comments that were supposedly off the book. There was a hell of a pinpoint operation. He's absolutely right. They're not targeting, it was a sarcastic comment, they're not targeting these underground networks of Hamas tunnels. That is pure propaganda. They're targeting the homes that exist on the edge of the Gazan border with Israel. That's what they're destroying, and they're using, this is a state-of-the-art military, which is destroying these. These are drones, these are shells from the water, from the blockade that they have there too, and they've targeted hospitals, they've targeted schools, media organizations, This is not this campaign against Gaza. This is a terror campaign against the Palestinians.
Palestinian. I was reading on the way over here. The Jerusalem Haaretz, the Jerusalem newspaper, says there's been 3,300 operations that are part of this, and there are 700 people dead. So that means one person for almost every 5 operations. And you're basically, what you're doing is you're going into Philadelphia. It's about the population and size of Philadelphia, okay? And you're trying to extract certain people out of certain buildings and certain munitions, which are stored almost unanimously among civilian populations for the very purpose of forcing the Israelis to do something to evoke world opinion. I think the remarkable story here is the dog that hasn't barked. There's, you're right. I think the Post has been amazingly pro-Israel. I think
The Washington Post?
Yeah, I think print has been a lot more sympathetic to Israel than TV. TV shows the bombs blowing up, look at the poor people. The print gets down and writes a long story. Oh, this is a more complicated issue than that. And I think, 3,300 operations and 700 dead. One dead is too many, right? But, they've shot rockets into Israel every day for 8 years. Something was going to happen at some point. The rest of the Muslim world has had nothing to say about this. Now, why is that?
Part of the reason I think there's such a disparity in the casualties is that it kind of seems like the Israeli government shows that they care more about their citizens. They're the ones that are doing more to build shelters that people will go and hide in when there's a threat. Whereas the Palestinian Authority, whenever they have a surplus money to use, they use that on munitions to send over into Israel to try and get through those shelters. They're not using those to protect their people. And so that's why, when all else equal, that's why you're going to see more casualties on the Palestinian side, because the government's not doing enough to protect their people from Israel.
Also, the war's being fought in Gaza. It's
yeah,
like in World War II, hardly anybody in the United States got killed because
it wasn't
here.
It wasn't
It was over there.
Yeah, it's in Europe.
I don't think that the facts agree, Jason. I mean, this is one state-of-the-art military against a group of impoverished individuals who are literally within the world's largest open-air prison. Nobody is going to defend the rockets that are coming from Hamas. Okay, that's indefensible. But what's also indefensible is this obscenely disproportionate response that's come from Israel.
I can
this
defend
massacre of civilians that's been on the other side. Now, the reality here is that Israel is the most UN-sanctioned country in the world for its occupation of Gaza.
That's
US
not surprising.
The U.S. is right.
That's why you shouldn't pay dues to the UN.
The U.S.
That's not because
has used
speak to
its
Israel.
UN veto and the Security Council as permanent member status. It's used its veto 41 times to protect Israel, to prevent the international sanction of Israel.
As it should.
No country has ever used the UN veto. No permanent member status country has used that on the Security Council. I think that's incredible. The United States sends
ever on
$30
any
billion
issue or just on Israel?
Entirely.
I mean, the
On
whole
all the
the Russians and the Chinese would use it all the time.
No, not as much. Nope. Look at the
Well, not as much.
Used it. That's not what you said.
Used it.
They have not used it 41 times on any issue. Combine all the issues which they've used it, it doesn't come close.
Part of that's because
The
this issue
sanctioning
is
of
so
Israel.
Yeah, the other thing
decades
is
long.
we don't. They
Right.
introduce stuff. We say if we know the Russians and the Chinese will veto it, we're not going to fool around with introducing it. That's more goes to how the
The
UN
U.S.
works.
is
The
sending
U.S. sticks up for Israel.
$30 billion.
I don't think you can win elections in this country if you say the U.S. shouldn't stick up for Israel.
$30 billion. That's the problem.
Well,
$30
no,
billion
that's the good thing.
are going to Israel
Every
from
year.
the United States every year.
How much is going to
Now,
Gaza?
Amnesty
How much is going to the
International-
Palestinians?
None.
Oh,
Amnesty International
no, it's not. No.
and Human Rights Watch have both documented that the U.S. law states that arms cannot be sold when there is the expectation that they will be used in the massacre of civilians, in the attack of civilians.
Yeah.
The arms trade from the United States, these $30 billion, which our taxpayers are sending to Israel, that is being used to massacre these Gazan civilians. That is illegal arms trade, according to UN convention, according to international law. That is something that we should stop. There should be a full arms embargo, not just on Israel, but on Hamas, on the Palestinian Authority as well. There should be a full arms embargo on the entire region. The U.S. should lead that effort, and we should investigate both sides for human rights abuses. That's the only way which we're going to resolve this, not by supplying $30 billion worth of arms to Israel, which is used to massacre the Gazans.
But here's one of the problems here is that the Palestinians don't protect their people
Right.
the way Israel
They put
protects
them
its
in
people.
harm's way.
Right, put them in harm's way. Yeah, you have Hamas individuals, hanging out at schools, using civilians as shields, human shields, and all that.
And what are the names of
Yeah.
those schools? UN schools.
Right.
Because the money we give to Palestine, the whole rest of the world gives to Palestine, Hamas diverts it to buying concrete to build tunnels to attack Israel,
Right.
and lets the people starve. That's why the other Muslim countries aren't barking, because they're like, these guys, they're getting what they deserve.
Yeah, because they know that they
Those
really aren't
civilians.
helping their people.
100
Yeah.
children, they deserve that.
War's hell. Things are going to happen. Okay? It's only 100. 3,300 attacks. It's only 100.
I think that's pretty callously dismissive of what's being done here.
It's not.
Like,
You're going to have accidents.
I'm not defending what the Gazans have done. Nobody should defend the rockets that are coming from that side.
I'm saying
either.
once you pick a
But
fight,
neither should
things are going to
anybody
happen.
defend.
Gaza,
Yeah.
the
It's
Hamas
funny that you
started
bring
it.
that up.
Hamas can end it anytime it wants. They want peace. They've been offered peace 4 times in the last 3 weeks and said no.
Who just rejected John Kerry's
Israel rejected the
attempt to end
ceasefire
this?
today.
That was
Yeah.
Israel.
But they went in this
Israel-
morning and got all the wounded they could get while Hamas was shooting at them while they were help Palestinians who had been wounded.
There's no justification for attacking hospitals where people are taking shelter.
Right,
For
which is
attacking
what
these
happened
apartment
today.
complexes
Hamas did today.
Where people are taking shelter. There's no justification for the Israeli military doing that.
Well, the Hamas attacked the Red Cross trucks trying to help the wounded.
Hamas is also transporting their munitions using UN ambulances.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that
Yeah.
happens as well. And you have to realize that some U.S. taxpayers' dollars are going to Hamas and to Palestine
Yeah.
because the U.S. is the biggest payer in dues to the United Nations. The United Nations sends money to Palestine to build schools and to give them ambulances that they then use not for the right purposes.
The United States is on, frankly, the wrong side of history here, and it has been for the longest time. There are UN votes regularly, 138 to 9 countries, voting to censure Israel for its treatment and illegal occupation of Palestinian territory.
Blanket statement,
Yeah.
just because the rest of the world believes something doesn't mean that
Doesn't
it's
make it right.
And doesn't Hamas have in its
It's not a logical
charter
argument.
that its goal is to obliterate
I'm
Israel?
afraid that it's less
Uh-huh.
logical to say that if the United States
That was
believes
not my
that-
argument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes
not
you're on the
arguing.
wrong side. Sometimes you're on the wrong side of the vote, and sometimes you're on but
Yeah.
yet still on the right side of history.
Yeah.
Really quick. Thank you guys
Yeah.
so much. Also this week, Texas Governor Rick Perry ordered up to 1,000 National Guard troops to the Texas border to help deal with the influx of Central American immigrants attempting to illegally cross into the U.S. There is a wide disagreement about whether this action is justified and will be effective. Jason Russell, what do you say about this?
I absolutely think that this will not be effective and is not justified. What the immigration crisis is that it's unaccompanied children going to the border. They're going up to border security and they're being taken into custody. And then they go through the legal process through the immigration courts. And an immigration court judge it takes longer than it should. It probably takes 2 or 3 years on average. But then the immigration court judge says, yes, you can stay with your family, or no, you need to go back to your home country. And that's a legal process. What Rick Perry's National Guard is doing is focusing on illegal immigrants, which is fair, but as tracked by the Pew Foundation over the last few years, illegal immigration essentially fell down to zero during the recession because there weren't jobs for illegal immigrants to come and take. So with that in mind, there's not really a reason to send the National Guard troops at the border because illegal immigration is actually very low right now historically.
Well, I mean, then this past week, it was announced that President Obama is sending some kind of a study team down to the border. What? I don't mean to stutter. However, but what is that all about? I mean, you need a study team to I mean, what is that all about?
This isn't an attack against President Obama. I think it's something any president would do. I think it's just they want to show that they're doing something about the problem.
Let's just show that he's doing something.
That they're doing something. That's something any president would do, left or right.
The
And
detached President Obama.
Probably won't be
We
very
do.
effective. Won't do much. But
We have some kind of problem because, they're going all over the country, grabbing up space to stash people. Now they say they're not going to stash them for long, but that's one we've heard before.
Right.
So I don't really know where this goes. But one interesting thing about this is there is a move out there to do immigration policy by states. For instance, Arizona is SB 70 and so forth. We know what they think about it, but Utah is just about the exact opposite. Utah welcomes immigrants, wants immigrant labor. You come there and you don't get in trouble. They're fine. They're all for that. They build their population and so forth.
Right.
So, it is sort of an interesting question. What happens if we stop making that all federal rules? What if Utah? What's wrong with Utah doing it like Utah wants to?
I agree. It's a very interesting bipartisan
Right.
solution because in Michigan, Republican Governor Rick Snyder wants 50,000 visas from the federal government for immigrants that can come work in Detroit.
Right.
And then you also get on the very far right. You could develop Patrick in Massachusetts is using some special legislation to allow more STEM immigrants to stay and work in Massachusetts universities.
Right. Does that mean that more of the less populous states, the more barren states, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho,
Iowa, big
Dakotas,
population,
will suddenly say, we welcome more immigrants,
Could be. I mean, a lot of that's what's holding that off, though, is like, for instance, Nevada is 90% of Nevada. 90% of Nevada is owned by the federal government.
Right.
So they're not doing anything with it. I mean, part of it they are. Parts of it they are. Most of it is just sitting there. So one of the things is, free up some of that land we're not using so people can create opportunity.
I think going down this road is avoiding the real crisis here. And these are children who they're undertaking a long, perilous journey. In order to come here. This is a humanitarian crisis. Their travel here.
All right, thank you guys. Finally, it's become increasingly clear that the Russian-backed separatists in Ukraine are responsible for the downing of Malaysian Flight 17 last week. Much discussion here this week has been about the President Obama's response to the act. Some point out that the Secretary of State, John Kerry, and UN Ambassador Samantha Powers have been much more forceful than the President, making his response looking weak in comparison. Brian McNichol, has the President been weak in the face of the Russian aggression? And if so, has the weakness contributed to the situation?
Well, okay, you know what? It's like when you drink too much, you don't know. You don't know. It's like you did 7 shots. Okay, 7 was too many. But if I'd have stopped at 4, was that okay? What I mean by that is, okay, we let the Orange Revolution go. There was a revolution. There was upheaval. There was energy for a revolution. We didn't do anything about it. I didn't necessarily object. Green Revolution, same situation. Didn't do anything about it. I didn't necessarily object. Syria, didn't do anything about it. I'm like, okay, you're still in a situation where when those body bags come home and those people, Mr. President, why did my son die? You still didn't have a good answer, right? Let that go. Pulled all the soldiers out of Iraq. Very public. We're not being no status of forces agreement. We're not leaving a single person here. Okay, I'm like getting a little dicier, but okay. But at some point, the rest of the world took our measure and said, this guy's not going to do anything about anything, and we can do whatever we want. And so incrementally, it's hard to know which of those decisions was one step over the line, but collectively, it's created a climate where everybody feels like they're free to do whatever they want.
Yeah. Free for all.
Free for all.
Yeah, and what's interesting is Mitt Romney's looking good right now. I'm serious. We all know that now.
Yeah.
Why? Go back to 2012 election year. Remember the debate. Mitt Romney, what did he say? What did Mitt Romney say?
Russia is our greatest geopolitical
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
President Obama going for re-election, ridiculed the dude. Remember that?
Yeah.
He ridiculed him, talked to him like he was a 6-year-old, condescending, big time.
Yeah.
I can believe how he. I was watching. I can believe how he ridiculed Mitt Romney. A very condescending fashion. Remember, he said, "Mr. Romney, the Cold War is over. We don't use muskets anymore." Remember that line?
Yeah, that's right.
You know, okay. Now here we are, 2014. Okay, again, Mitt Romney is looking good right about now, and people are talking about what to do. I still agree with Peter King, the congressman. Don't allow any Russian planes into the United States. Also, President Obama should get together with the rest of the world, form some kind of coalition, go to the World Cup. People say, hey, take the World Cup out of Russia. Okay, Russia has it in 2018, if my news is right. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
take it away. Okay, now Jimmy Carter boycotted the Moscow Olympics back in 1980. We remember that. Okay, I'm not calling for a boycott. Just take it out, because that's unfair to the athletes to boycott the thing the way Jimmy Carter did. That was a huge error. You know, move the thing. You know, get an international coalition of some type and take it to another country. Yes, and I'm sure Nick disagrees with everything I just said.
Let me tell you then. I think it's pretty clear the jet was shot down by these Ukrainian militias that exist now in the east of Ukraine.
Supplied by the Russians.
Combating the government. Yes.
Working in concert with the Russians.
I also think that they are supplied with the Russians. But there's a line you need to draw when you go down that reasoning. The White House wasn't drawing that line. And neither was the Washington political establishment drawing that line. And this is it. It's that there may be supplies flowing from Russia. And there probably are. But that doesn't mean that Putin orders the shoot down of a commercial jet. I mean, that's just so illogical that I find it rather comic that people would believe this.
No,
this is a geopolitical struggle here in which Russia and the West are fighting for the public image. The last thing you're going to do in that kind of conflict is shoot down a commercial airliner on purpose and order it as state-based terrorism.
No, I agree. And I think very recently the American intelligence officials came out and said even the separatists probably did not think that they were going to shoot down a commercial plane. They did not mean to do that. They thought it was an incoming Ukrainian military plane of some sort, probably. And there's no way that Putin would have ever done that. He's not crazy. He's not a Stalin. He's not a Hitler. He's very intelligent, and he's obviously very aggressive, but he's not crazy.
And he's a KGB agent.
He's calculated.
He's very calculated. That's a perfect word for him. Now, I do think that Obama's response has been weak, but I don't think that means it shouldn't have been weak. I mean, it's not clear where America's responsibility is for the obligation to do something in this situation. Yeah. What right do we have to say Ukraine should be exactly as we say it should be? So.
Right. I agree with that. And I think the reason that when this whole conflict began and Russia began shooting for the annexation of Crimea, I knew from the start, I said I don't think there's going to be any serious kind of, repercussion against Russia because the geopolitical interests simply don't exist for the United States to do it over Ukraine. And also, Russia's the country here that actually has more leverage, and that's the reason you've only seen these kinds of, disparate sanctions targeting his Putin's friends.
Right. European countries are weak.
His allies. Yeah, and the reason that they've been doing this.
Feckless. European countries are weak, man. Weak.
Well, one thing we could do that is not a military response is go back to exporting energy.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
Oil and gas, natural gas. Right. Give those people a market option.
Right. Yeah, to take up the void.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, to fill the void.
Yeah.
I want to clarify. I wasn't saying that I was supporting at all what Putin's done. I think obviously Russia doesn't. I don't think Russia has a right to those lands. I don't think they should be supplying separatists. But I agree. I think if America is going to do anything about the situation, it needs to be through economics, not sanctions.
Now we'll do the viewer question. So our first question is from Ross Quinn. The question is, If Iron Dome is working so well, why does Israel need to attack Gaza? And the second part of the question is, why not simply maintain a defensive posture?
Because
it
it's
doesn't.
85%. It's so 15% still hit.
It doesn't need to.
And they're
It
increasing
wants
the
to.
capacity of the rockets to reach farther and farther into, like, one landed less than a mile from. That's why we cut off the flights. The other
Oh yeah, from the airport.
From the airport,
Yeah, right, exactly.
So the rockets are getting
Uh-huh.
bigger and badder. So the time to sit and wait is over.
This is not a battle on an equal playing field. This is.
It's not. You
a
don't. It's not Pee Wee
state-of-the-art
football. You don't have.
military
You don't. Oh, we can only have the
attacking
90-pound
civilians,
guys.
including children. I mean, that's what it is. And the reason they're telling them get out of your house because they're about to seize that land. Because that's the idea.
Aren't
It's
some of
the
those children
expansion.
being used as human shields? Aren't some of those children being used as human shields?
Yeah.
Am I right or wrong?
Yeah.
How?
Oh,
Look at this from Israel's
Alright,
point of
moving-
view.
It-
If they
I
see
mean, I
themselves
think it's
at
just
war, I think
incredible.
it's justified. If they
Yeah.
see themselves as at war, then
It's
from their
yeah.
point of view, it's justified for them to.
It's incredible
Use
to
the
try to
response they
blame
can do.
Palestine or Hamas for the Israeli murder of children. I mean, I just think that's so far out there.
Do you think
I
these
think
children choose to be
Hamas
human
chose
shields?
to start this,
Responsibility.
and Hamas has the tools to end it anytime they want. What else you got?
Okay, the second question is from Gwen Brook. The question is, the main reason Russia attacked Ukraine was that Ukraine wanted closer ties to Europe. Now those very countries it wanted closer ties to are turning their backs on Ukraine. Anyone notice the irony in that?
Yeah.
It's absolutely
Yeah,
true.
that's true.
large
Yeah,
irony.
that's exactly true. Right.
Back the
Right.
wrong pony.
Right. As I said earlier, the other European countries obviously are scared to touch Vladimir Putin in Russia. You
This-
know, embargoes or sanctions or whatever.
In fact,
you know,
continuing to sell weapons to Russia.
yeah,
The
France
French,
sold
yeah, a bunch of helicopters
weapons
and
to
stuff.
Russia just a couple
Yeah.
days ago, right? Yeah.
This is the geopolitical foundation.
All about the money.
of this.
You know, remember Watergate. Follow the money.
What has happened is Ukraine threw off a president who wasn't for this, and then installed a president who was for tilting west, and then that's when Russia shut it down.
Well, this was a realpolitik war going on here.
Yeah.
That both Russia and the United States want control, geopolitical control of this area of Ukraine, and the CIA was sending, as well as the State Department, was financing the protesters before and the separatists inside of Ukraine before they deposed the Yanukovych government. That was a coup. We don't call that a coup because it was in our favor. We don't call what happened there a coup. Okay, so now the Russians are doing exactly what we were doing before. They are also financing the opposition because this is a battle over Ukraine. And both powers act the same way in the same situation. Now the West is calling, oh, this wonderful democratic revolution that happened there because the leader is now pro-Western. When the leader was pro-Russian, it was the conversation reversed.
But the Russians
Russia
were
was
destabilizing
This
him
is great.
too.
Was destabilizing them?
The government before the present government.
No, that was the
Yeah,
Yanukovych
no,
government.
yeah, they were.
And they
See,
were- no,
they
they
what
were
they
in
don't
favor.
want is an independent Ukraine. Because an independent Ukraine can decide
No.
is never more than one
They were
election
very
away
close.
from.
That's why
going-
Yanukovych is in Russia now. They were
That's what I'm
very
saying.
close.
They destabilized.
The West
they
won
want
this
control
battle.
of Ukraine.
The West
we
won
want
this battle
them to
because
not
the
have
government is
control.
now
We don't want to
pro-Western.
control it, but we don't want them to control it.
Okay, thank you guys. Okay, and now it's time for the most underrated and underreported story of the week.
I will go first. Thank you. There's an effort out there to link the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, and Endangered Species Act enforcement to global warming. So in other words, if you say the prairie jumping mouse or whatever it is, right? This is its habitat. It's an endangered species. We will protect this habitat. So what they're saying is, as a result of global warming, the mouse might have to move up here. So everything from here to here now has to be protected and taken off of energy exploration or any other commercial use. Any other way of anybody making money and living happy lives. Okay, and they're about to do it. And part of what's going on now is to declare the definition of the waters of the United States. They're trying to extend that to ponds on farms, and so forth. So like if your cow drinks out of the pond, which how else would the cow get water? You are damaging the environment, and you're subject to fines,
penalties,
and your ranch is useless.
Right.
And you're rendering all this, taking all these people's property.
Right, a private citizen
on two pigs.
pay
in a park.
fines. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Big story coming at us. People not watching it. Whole middle of the country in danger of being just usurped by the government.
More democratic regulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Next.
Yes. So there was a new study out of the University of Arkansas on charter schools. And what it found was that charter schools are performing on average 17 points better on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or the nation's report card, than traditional public schools. That's a 40% better in terms of the score in both reading and math. It also found that they're getting a better return on their investment. So for every dollar spent on schools, that dollar is going much further at a charter school than at a public school. And as a result, better educated kids that are going to these charter schools, usually underprivileged kids, they're growing up and they're having much higher lifetime earnings that they did not have before. So, part of that is that charter schools, they all practice different methods. That's kind of, the whole point of charter schools is that they're trying different things for different students. So there's not, one charter school model that you can just follow. But it's interesting that when you give these kids a choice of where to go, that they're finding much better scores than they would have otherwise.
My most underreported or underrepresented story is a story that, yes, it's been reported a lot on the sports pages, but it should be taken and made broader on the news side pages and other pages of the paper on TV broadcasts, and because it transcends sports. The biggest reason it's a sports story is because it involves an athlete. An athlete, of course, I'm talking about is whom? Ray Rice, Baltimore Ravens. Okay, domestic violence case. Now, Roger Goodell announced, Thursday, I believe it was, that Ray Rice would be suspended for 2 games. Most of us probably by now have seen the TMZ video of his then fiance, now wife, knocked out cold on the floor, him dragging her out of the elevator, and all this kind of stuff. And Roger Goodell suspends him for only 2 games. You get 4 games for marijuana, which is legal in Colorado and Washington State. But you only get 2 for beating up a woman. And the evidence showed that he hit her right in the face. She was unconscious, knocked her out. And now the question is, does the NFL really respect women? Even though, look at the numbers, it's believed that between 40 and 50% of NFL fans are whom? Women. Now, to me, women should be, on a national basis, should be up in arms about this, should be just enraged. Ray Rice should have gotten at least 8 games. At least 8 games. This is crazy. Look at Michael Vick. Michael Vick, remember, Roger Goodell suspended him for a whole season, for dog fighting. So is the NFL saying that, abusing dogs is more important than
8 times.
Exactly, than abusing women. Exactly.
Right.
Hey, come on, and it speaks volumes.
Mine is a pretty chilling story.
Uh-oh.
Yep. Sorry to end on it.
Uh-oh.
So there was a story going around this week and last about how there's a new classified document, a 28-page classified document regarding Saudi involvement in 9/11 and individuals who may have helped finance 9/11 and potential government, the involvement of states. Now, I watched a press conference by Representative Thomas Massey, in which he had just read these 28 pages of classified documents, and he was visibly affected by the fact that what was held in these pages and what it detailed about Saudi involvement was so jarringly different from what has been put out publicly by the political establishment, by the military, by the U.S. And he called a press conference immediately after reading the call for their release. 3 senators, 3 congressmen have done the same. All all of the chairs of the 9/11 Commission and the congressional inquiry say that it is implausible that it was simply a terrorist operation alone, that there was no state involvement. You know, in my mind, I can't think of anything more important than understanding what happened that day. And if it's true that there was some kind of state involvement, you know, this has been the basis for U.S. policy for 13 years now, and we still feel its effects today. You know, I can't think of anything more important than knowing the truth about what happened.
Thank you. All right, that's all for this week. Thanks for watching The Square Circle. We'll see you next week.